Shelley Evans. I've been a member here for 30 years.
And you like it?
Yeah, I'm getting used to it.
So people
We
say.
all love him.
Well, he reads from the Torah real well.
I'm Elaine Gladstone, and I hate to tell you this, but I've been a member here for 37 years, and I was 2 when I came.
Don't you wish it? Thanks, my name is Cynthia Whitwood.
Cynthia.
We've been members for, no,
25 years.
to Beth on. So, a lot of them
No,
have been here longer than
too.
we have. And we came from, well, actually, from Dallas and New York.
My back, the better half.
Well, excuse me. Or you could.
Anyhow, delighted to be here tonight and to meet you.
Yes.
Understand your brother's doing the same thing over in Sugar Land tonight.
Yes. Yes.
You
He's
have
in-
some very
he's
good
in
friends
Bethel.
who are participating over there tonight.
Really? Who?
Debbie Siegel.
Debbie,
Joan Lang is in.
Joan.
Joan Lang, John Howard Lang,
Beautiful.
Debbie and Marty Siegel.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of some of the, I don't know if the Eagles are over there or not. There's a number.
Has your brother been here?
I think so. I think he's met with
No,
them.
but I mean in Houston.
Oh, my brother's been here for 7 years.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
7
I've been here.
years?
He's been here for 7 years. I've been here for like 7 hours. So
7 years? I thought he was here longer than
no.
that. Rabbi Bolt?
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Just-
I'm sorry.
Israel Recovery, not from here, but I had to live in Texas 10 years before I could say I was from Texas. So
I'm living
I've
here
got a few
longer,
years
and I still
before.
don't say I'm from Texas.
Been in Houston for a long time.
I'm Siggy Chavez. I've been in Houston a few years, and I've been a member here about a year, ish.
My name's Patricia Cromer, and I've been learning with your brother for several years now. And so I'm real happy that you're here. And welcome to Houston.
Thank you.
I hope you like it. I personally am from Chicago, so I haven't ever gotten used to y'all.
We don't say y'all near as often as y'all say we say y'all.
Say what?
What's Norman?
Thank you.
I'm Rabbi Gideon Estes, the Rabbi of Congregation Romy. Been in Houston almost 2 years. July 4th, there'll be 2 years of actually living in Houston, and July 15th will be 2 years of being the rabbi here. It's been a really great day. I don't know if you'll know, but today is the National Day of Prayer. Congress kind of, in Reagan, it was dedicated that the first Thursday of May is the Day of Prayer. There was an interfaith prayer breakfast that I participated in this morning. It was kind of fun to do.
So it was a year ago when Governor Perry made that major event.
That was a different kind of thing in terms of, this is actually like an ecumenical, like interfaith kind of day of prayer, not a gathering of Christians praying as Christians
In Reliance
at
Stadium.
the exclusion of everyone else.
Yeah, I remember that was a
Because
bit
I was
of a
actually signature
controversy.
on the letter opposing that.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. I saw that letter. My brother asked me if he should sign it because it was saying like, day of prayer for all, the governor of Texas should represent all of Texas,
Oh, he does. But he
yeah,
did.
right.
and he had just a day of prayer for
Yeah,
Christians.
Certain people.
Yeah, that was this is actually like by an act of Congress that declares that the first Thursday is a National Day of Prayer without kind of any guidelines, and it's there.
Without hearing.
So that's something good to have today. So I'm a little more formally dressed.
Mac Valentine, been in about 9 months at the synagogue, I guess, something like that. Yes, I'm finished.
I'm Rhoda Zella
You take the rest
Valentine,
of my time.
his better half. When my late husband and I moved here from Toronto, we moved to Houston and we joined Beth On. So I met some of the people here. And then from there, my husband had passed away, and then I went to United Orthodox, which I am a member there as well. And then we came back here because I like the group, and it's a great synagogue, and it's close to home, because I live in this area. But I've studied with Rabbi Traxler, with Rabbi Goldstein, so
Basically,
you know the group.
yeah. It seems like you've stopped up in every. Remember, isn't Rabbi Traxler as Chabad? So there's UOS Chabad. Basically, you're friends with everyone.
I am. And I've worked for Jewish organizations, so.
There you go.
Okay, I'm Rita Marshall. I'm the only native Texan at this whole table.
No, Mac is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mac, I didn't know. I apologize. But usually I'm the only Texan in the whole group. And I've been a member, like I was at Beth Am first. We were at UOS when my kids grew up, and then we went to Beth Am. And then we went to Sugar Land because I moved out there to be near my daughter who lost her husband. And then we came back here. And so it seems like I've been here forever. I don't remember ever not belonging to the synagogue with most of these people, except for the new ones, and they're like family.
We like having you.
Thank you. You're only saying that because I'm picking up the bagels tomorrow.
And other things.
My name is Rabbi Yaakov Walby. I grew up in New York, but at the tender age of 16, my parents shipped me off to Israel to learn in yeshiva there. I was there from 16 till I was 20. I got married when I was 20. I'm 25 years old now, so I've been married for 5 years. I have 3 children. I received rabbinic ordination from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Rabbinic Court of Jerusalem at the age of 23. A little bit more than a year after I wrote my first book.
You wrote a book?
Well, that sounds like I wrote 2 books. I will say I wrote my first book. So far, it's the only one, but it's still my first.
And what was the topic?
It was Talmudic,
Oh,
and it was in Hebrew.
oh well, forget it.
What was called?
It was called V'chai B'hem, which is it's a verse in Leviticus 18. It talks about a lot of end of life situations in Talmud. So that was the age of 22, and then 23 I got my smicha, my rabbinic ordination. Like I said, I was heavily courted by Torch because my older brother is the executive director of Torch, and he wanted to bring me in. He has an eye for talent.
You're only saying that because he's not here to defend himself.
And
I could just see your family getting all together.
oh yeah, I'm one of 9 siblings. I'm the 6th of 9 children.
Kind of horror.
And
Your mother was busy.
yeah, my mother's a superwoman. So.
Sounds like it.
And my wife is also, so that's
How many
nice.
girls and how many boys?
7 boys and 2 girls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 3 boys, then a girl, then 3 boys, and then a girl, and then another boy.
And where do your parents live?
My parents live in upstate New York, about a half hour from the city. And there's only two children yet unmarried who live at home. And my parents were married for 38 years. So now I joined the Torch faculty. I'm sure everyone here has heard of Torch.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to say, I know this is the first time Torch has been here, but Torch was founded in 1998 by a group of Houston families. They brought in, I think, four rabbis. And over the years, we've progressed and we've grown, and now we have 5 different divisions. We have a Jewish ethics division, which is the Robert Grossman, very good. We give credits for doctors and lawyers who need their accreditation for ethics. So that's one division. We have the young adults division, which I head, which is why I'm here, and we have the women's division. We have Shalhevet. This Shalhevet is our congregational partnership, which I'll get to in a little bit. What we do exactly with congregations, how we partner up with congregations, and the last one is for high school kids. Is the JSN or JSU? I'm new here. So now Shalhevet is only 2 years old, but it's by far our most successful program. Shalhevet means a flame, which is a reference to the verse in the Song of Songs, which talks about the Shalhevet Yah, the flame of God, which we view as that spark, that Jewish spark that makes us so driven and so determined to accomplish great things, like Jewish people, across the world are doing incredible things in all spheres. That's a result of the Shalheves Yah, the flame of God that's within us. So Shalheves is playing that idea, which is when we partner with synagogues to offer an offering of adult education. And Orami is the 11th synagogue in Houston that we've partnered up with, which is a beautiful number. Which it's great when all Jews come together, and you have the widest array of congregations that all have this one thing in common, that they want to grow and they want to learn and become educated in all different areas of Jewish thought and Jewish life. And today, it's a very special day in Torch's history because we have our first class in RME. We're very excited about that. And number 2, we signed up our 12th congregation, which I forgot the name.
Houston Congregation of Reform Judaism.
The Houston Congregation of Reform Judaism today signed up to have Shall Have It. We're going to be there in June. That's very exciting.
That's exciting.
Now I wanted to say one more thing. A tremendous thank you to the young rabbi, the dynamic rabbi of this congregation, Rabbi Gideon Estes, who was so accommodating, and so it's a tremendous pleasure that you guys have, that you're able to have such a wonderful leader, so young and dynamic, to run your organization. I'm sure you're going with them to Israel, right? Yeah, that's going to be fun. I wish I could join. I really miss Israel. I've been out for so long. And thank you Rabbi Estes, for making this happen and bringing us in. And it's a tremendous honor for us to be here.
It's a win-win.
Win-win, yeah. Okay, so tonight's topic, and the topic of our series, the 6-week series, is Mussar. Mussar. Has anyone ever heard the name Mussar? Is the word ring a bell for anyone? Anybody wants to venture an idea what this is? Rabbi Estes, come on, teach us.
So, what Mussar is started by Israel Salanter. It's called, basically the way I kind of describe it is basically it helps give you that kind of teachings to help you lead a good kind of moral life. Mussar helps give us direction of how we should live, and it's the ways of kind of directing us towards. Generally, the polite way when someone wants to give you some corrective advice is they ask you if they can give you a little bit of Mussar, which kind of helps you on not just it's not about halachic kind of things in terms of the ritual measurements of how we kind of do something. It's more about the moral principles of how we guide life and how we kind of direct ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Very good. There's no way I could have written it as a good introduction. So Mussar is the way of Jewish self-discovery, discovering who you are, and self-perfection, character and ethical perfection. Right? There's 2 parts of Torah. There's 2 parts of what we need to do. We need to, observe the mitzvos and do what we need to do and do what's, learn the Torah, etc. And we have to become better people. We have to become perfect people. We have an obligation to take our midos, take our character traits, and improve on them and correct them. We're all born with a certain amount, an innate amount of good and bad characteristics. Obviously, we see with young children. Young children, from day one, you could see that they have different temperaments. I know I have 3 children. Each one of them is just a totally different, different kid, totally different makeup, totally different character makeup, in every way. And people are born with a collection of good and bad midos. Midos is the Hebrew words for traits, but it really means measurements. Like a character trait, and it means also measurement because you have a certain amount of anger, and you have a certain amount of patience, and you have a certain measurement of these qualities and these faults. And your job is to balance it in a way that you are a perfect person. You have the perfect balance of patience. You don't get angry too fast. You are generous. You're kind. You don't get angry. You have there's a whole list. I have a whole list here of different midos, different characteristics. I have a list of a few hundred good traits and bad traits. So there's plenty. And Mussar is what we use to make ourselves better people. Now, Rabbi Estes referenced Rabbi Israel Salanter. Rabbi Israel Salanter was a rabbi who lived in the 19th century, from I think 1817 to 1883. Makes sense? And he was the one who took this idea, which is this part of Judaism, and made a movement out of it. He made people who were Mussar people. And I want to talk tonight a little bit about, because we're talking about the introduction to Mussar, I want to talk a little bit about the background. What was the backdrop towards this movement that was started by Rabbi Israel Salanter. Salanter is actually not his name. His name was Lipkin, but he lived in a city called Salant, so he's called Salant. It's sort of calling me or Rabbi Yaakov Houstoner. Same thing, but that's the way it is. By the way, I just said I'm a Houstonian. I just said that.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, I was hoping someone would notice that.
But it's Houstonian.
Rabbi Yaakov Houstonian. Same thing. Rabbi Israel Salanter. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about the backdrop on to, what was going on to the Jewish people at that time that spurred him to make this movement, and why he felt it was necessary to have a major reshifting of the focus of our Judaism. So now we're talking about the period that's called the Enlightenment, right? After the Renaissance, there's the period called the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, they say it started about the year 1650 to about the year 1850. That's the time period given. And the two words that I always use to describe the major shifts in ideology that happened in the Enlightenment is nationalism and rationalism. What does nationalism mean? In Europe, before the Enlightenment, it was just one big mess. It was the church dominated everything. There were no individual member nations. It was just pretty much like one country was dominated by Christianity. Comes along the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment does is that it gives member nations national identity. There's nationalism. You are first and foremost a Spaniard or an Italian or a German or a French. They gave people an identity as a country above religion. Religion was relegated to secondary importance. That's nationalism. Rationalism is when Christian Europe put God in the back seat, put the church in the back seat, secondary importance. Now everything's dominated by the human mind, right? Empirical science, industrialization, the scientific revolution. These are all themes that became super duper big during the Enlightenment period. The birth of liberal democracy. We value humans as a human, as an individual, not just as an extension of the church. These seem to us as very basic ideas, but during this period, or before the period, talk about the Dark Ages, there was no such a thing as civil rights. You had no rights as a human being. You were nothing. You were a serf. You're a pawn in the hand of someone else. The church dominated everyone. They dominated everything. All you were was just like a pawn or an asset in the hand of the rulers. At this time, we see the introduction of secularism. Secularism is when the focus goes away from God towards man. We meet great political thinkers like John Locke, right? We know that the Constitution of the United States is based upon primarily the teachings of John Locke, rights of a man. We meet a fellow by the name of Isaac Newton, who obviously one of the greatest scientific minds out there. This is an explosion of the human as a person, and as someone who's able to change the world himself as an individual. How does this affect the Jews? So obviously, when the Gentiles are less religious, it's always a better thing for us. Right? For 1,000 years, the Jews were persecuted. They were viewed as subhuman. They were viewed as the devil. That's who they were. They weren't allowed to do anything. They were viewed as the scum of the earth. And now, obviously, this is an idea which was resurrected by Hitler, as Jews being subhuman. But now the Jewish people recognize as humans, and they were allowed to mainstream into the general culture, which is a beautiful thing. Jewish people were allowed to have. They weren't allowed to own businesses. They weren't allowed to go become professionals. They weren't allowed to become doctors or lawyers. They were limited by every office, by every higher office. They couldn't run for public office. They were limited. There were edicts of toleration to the Jews. Jews were allowed citizenship, which is a beautiful thing. Now we take it for granted. We're citizens, of course. We have human rights. We're no different than anyone else. But in the 1,000 years that preceded the Enlightenment, the Jews were not allowed to own property, to vote. Obviously, they didn't have any votes, but they weren't allowed to do a lot of things. Even as recently as the 1850s, Jews were not allowed to have citizenship in Spain and in Switzerland. Now,
You say there weren't any Jews in Spain at that time.
but the official expulsion was still part of law. Like the Jews were the expulsion that had happened in the Inquisition in the 14th, 15th century. That was still law till as recently as 100 years ago. I think it was 1921 when they finally changed that law. It means the law that Jews aren't allowed to live here as living as Jews, that was still law as recently as 100 years ago. It's so hard for us to imagine that. The major event of this time is the French Revolution in 1749, right? They kill Louis XIV. Napoleon's crowned emperor. Napoleon loves the Jews. Napoleon, he goes on this military conquest, taking over all of Europe, right? Taking over everyone. And everywhere he goes, he spreads the ideas of the Enlightenment. He spreads it, like, what was the motto? The motto of the French Revolution was liberty, equality, brotherhood. They said that even as they were killing people. They're killing people left and right. But hey, as we know, you got to break a few eggs to make a good omelet. So as Napoleon takes over Russia, takes over Europe, he puts into motion a very liberal outlook and attitude towards the Jews, where eventually all European countries grant citizenship to the Jews. So after 1,000 years of being marginalized economically and physically in every way, socially, the Jewish people were allowed to do everything at once. The 19th century was a great century with regard to anti-Semitism. There were no pogroms, like none of those major events of outbreaks of anti-Semitism. Well, what do you say, Rabbi?
Well, for the most part, no, but there were still various ones at various times in the 19th century.
But not to the same scale, we'd
And
say.
then at the end of the 19th century, you had major ones, like Kishinev, things like that. 1881 is some of the worst pogroms in church history. So.
I guess that's true. But there was also a lot of intellectual
No,
anti-Semitism.
it's true. Haskalah and emancipation was the major kind of thing of the 19th century. I was a Jewish history major.
That's
sorry.
okay. Yeah.
So more nuanced.
I think there was racism even after that. In Houston, at least, I know there was places we couldn't live in Houston and places we couldn't go and country clubs that we couldn't belong to.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean,
Still the
just
same way
recently.
today, too.
Well, maybe, but not as bad as it used to be.
Does anyone here really think that anti-Semitism doesn't exist?
Oh, it sure does.
Yeah. Which place had the greatest outbreak of anti-Semitism in history? That was, Nazi Germany, obviously, right? Where they created a plan of mass genocide, killing all the Jews. Hitler did everything to try to kill as many Jews as possible. He lost the war in order to try to kill the 5 million Soviet Jews. We all know that. You agree with that?
He's looking at him.
I read in the foreword that there are people Jews moving back to Germany because of the economic situation.
Berlin is the fastest growing Jewish city in Europe.
Yeah, I read that in the foreword.
Because it's the only country besides Israel that gives immigration benefits to Jews.
Yeah, there's I think tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands of Russian Jews are leaving Russia and going to Berlin, going to Germany. But think about it, the place that was the most liberal and the most democratic and the most sophisticated country in the world in the 19th and early 20th century, that is the place where it had the biggest explosion of anti-Semitism ever. It's one of those ironic things about Jewish history that...
You can really say the same for Spain and the Inquisition here.
I guess.
The golden age in Spain was wonderful. Spain was so advanced over most of Europe with the Islamic influence, and then, which, it seems to be how it goes.
There was also the economy in Europe that led to.
What? That led to the...
to the Second World War.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of factors, and you know the League of Nations, what they did to the Germans.
The
You know,
Versailles
they-
Treaty was horrible.
Yeah, and but still, I'm saying we're talking about the most sophisticated country in the world was Germany, the most aristocratic, or how do we say, like upper class country. I don't know how to say it, but
And the one where the
So
Jewish
are there
community
very
was most
many
integrated.
Jews left up there on Germany and Russia? Are
what
there-
now?
Yeah.
For sure,
Because I hear that there isn't as many as there were.
for sure not. They were all killed. We know that.
There are really, really very few in there anymore.
Yeah, but I'm talking about even before the war, before World War II. How could you? If I told you, if today was not 2012, it was 1912, and I would tell you that in 30 years there's going to be this tremendous explosion of anti-Semitism in Germany.
Yeah.
You would never believe it. You would say maybe in
Russia,
Czechoslovakia,
sure.
yeah, Russia, or in Poland, or that's what you would say. In Germany, Germany's the most sophisticated, advanced country, liberal country in the world. And it's one of those ironies about Jewish history. So now, this time we have Jews reaching the highest offices around the world, like cabinet ministers, etc. The twice prime minister of England, Benjamin Disraeli, was a Jew, even though he baptized. We all know that you could baptize 1,000 times. You may get wet, but you'll for sure stay Jewish. And he was a Jew. You know, obviously he baptized, he became Christian, but he's still Jewish. And he rose to the top to become the prime minister of England, which is a tremendous office. The Jewish people they were allowed to. Excuse me. So what was the Jewish reaction to this? So obviously there were some Jews who just the emancipation and the temptation of being able to finally, after hundreds of years, being allowed to live amongst the general population and to get educated like everyone else and to own businesses like everyone else and to own land like everyone else, that temptation was so great, and they just totally assimilated. But that was, I would say, is a minority. Would you agree to that, Rabbi Estes?
Probably,
Yeah. But the majority of Jews at that time, they tried to make some sort of synthesis between Germany, or Germany is the epicenter, but between their host nation and their Judaism. They tried to assimilate in a way where they could somehow come to a peaceful existence, sort of meet the Gentiles halfway. They're letting us come to their universities and join their industries. We'll also give up a little bit of our Judaism in order that we could be able to have peaceful coexistence. The problem with that is that too many Jews were just dropping their Judaism and dropping enough of their Judaism where it was sort of like a stampede away from Judaism. And this is the backdrop on which we see the Mussar movement form. Now, there were two major Jewish reactions to this problem, or the two responses. The Jewish response towards the problem of Jews assimilating and abandoning their Judaism, there were two major responses, two major movements that came out of it. One of them was successful, very successful, and one of them failed miserably. The one that was successful is the Hasidic movement. Okay. That was successful. The one that failed is the Mussar movement. And the reason why the Hasidic was successful is because the Hasidic movement was centralized in Poland. Now, in Poland, the Jews were less sophisticated, as you might imagine, than their friends in Lithuania and Germany. And what the founders of Hasidus, what they offered was they opened up the door to social Judaism. But they made Judaism so much fun, and they partied nicely, and they sang, and they made it so much fun, and they made such a tight community that people would not abandon their community and assimilate. Which that was very successful, and it swept over the entire Poland. Everyone became Hasidic, whatever that means. I'm not getting into that today. it came with it's a very clear social structure of a community setting where everyone can feel at home, everyone can feel comfortable, and as we know today, they still maintain their distinct look. We're Jewish. Everyone knows that, and they have a supreme leader, and they have to have such a tight community where people it's so warm and so friendly and so much fun. They focus on the pleasure. Food, exactly. Everyone knows. Yeah, there's tons of food and there's tons of drink, and that was a way that they were able to sort of protect themselves from the influences of the Enlightenment period. Now, obviously, the best would be is to have the benefits of both, but it was really hard to I think in America today we're able to benefit from we don't need to, like, I have plenty of friends who go to law school or go to medical school and they wear their kippah. They're comfortable enough because that's the environment we live in today. But 200 years ago, it was very difficult for you to go to school and study philosophy with your kippah on. So in order to protect the Polish Jews from that influence, the Hasidic movement's founders, they developed this community setting where people would feel so comfortable and so warm they would never leave it. Rabbi Israel Salanter, because he was in the more, shall we say, sophisticated area of Europe, as in Lithuania and later on in Germany, he came up with a totally different new idea in order to, ostensibly, to give Judaism such deep meaning that no one would ever abandon it. What he developed was called the Mussar movement. Now, I wanted to give a few, I think to best illustrate what Mussar is, I collected a few stories about Rabbi Salanter. And each one of these anecdotes is like it's a nugget of wisdom that demonstrates what Mussar is in a clear way. So the story goes, and I don't know if this one's true. This one is like the legend about Rabbi Salanter, that he was once praying on Yom Kippur, holiest day of the year. And obviously he's the rabbi, he's sitting in the front, and he's praying, and the guy next to him is just sobbing, and he's crying, and he has his prayer book, and the tears are cascading down his face, praying with such devotion. So Rabbi Salanter had this inspiration. He wanted to pray in such a prayer book that there was such devotion, put into every word. So he started leaning over to try to pray from that guy's book. And the guy saw him and shoved him away. This is my book. So Rabbi Salanter said, how is it possible that someone who's so devoted in their Judaism, in the ritualistic part of Judaism, could be so mean and so act in such a way on Yom Kippur? There's something majorly missing here. He's not growing from within. If someone who's really taking the lesson of Judaism to heart would never do such a thing. Push someone away on the holiest day of the year, to push someone away who wants to read from your Siddur, there's something major, there's something off in that. The picture just doesn't add up. This person obviously is focusing way too much on the ritualistic part of Judaism, but not focusing at all upon what Judaism demands upon us in our relationship of man to man, in our interpersonal relationship, in our ethical status, in our character perfection. He's not focusing on that at all. So what he did was that he was a tremendously brilliant man. There's a story goes that he would go, traveling rabbi, he would go from town to town, and he would give a discourse, a Talmudic discourse. And he came to one place, and because we know that Jews are very resistant to new ideas. Jewish people don't like new ideas. You come up with a new idea, a new solution, a new outlook, a new view on life, people are going to reject it. So he had obviously a lot of detractors. He had people who didn't want him to succeed. So one time, he would come to a new place, and he was going to give a discourse. And what he used to do is he would give a tremendous halachic or Talmudic discourse, brilliant. He was obviously a very brilliant man. And then afterwards, once it's over, he would throw in like Mussar ideas, because once he has their attention, he's able to. It's the famous bait and switch that we all know. Once you have someone's attention, you throw in what you really want to say, and he doesn't even notice that it's a little bit clandestine way of getting information across. So he would always give a tremendous discourse, and everyone would come, the famous rabbi, the famous Gaon, the famous brilliant scholar, and they would go and listen to him, and he would obviously gain their approval. He would gain their, they would trust him, and then at the end he would hit them hard with some heavy duty mussar. And he would tell them, you have to make yourself a better person, you have to work on your perfection, you have to ethical and character perfection that you need to work on. A way for, backdoor way to get in. So he reached one place, one town, and they used to put a list of sources, a source sheet that people would read beforehand, and he would go up and give a discourse on the sources that were provided. So he got to one place, and he goes to the door, and he sees the sources, and some guy had taken off his sources and put in a whole bunch of random sources. A bunch of random sources that have nothing to do with each other. Obviously, they played a trick on him. Everyone prepared those sources, and he was going to connect the ideas, and and it was totally unrelated. So he was such a tremendous genius that he sat there for 2 minutes and thought of the sources until he came up with a brilliant discourse relating to the sources that were altered. This shows us, A, the magnitude of what kind of intelligence we're dealing with. Tremendous, tremendous genius. And there was a lot of resistance to this new idea. This new idea, Judaism has been around for 5,000 years or 3,000 years, depending on how you count. Don't come in with new solutions. Obviously, he was right. His solution was a tremendous idea, but obviously the demands of Mussars, we'll see a little later on, were a little bit too much to become a mass movement and end up being a very targeted movement that was successful, but only in pockets. There's another story about him, that he was walking to shul, again on Yom Kippur. This is another very famous story. And Kol Nidre, which is the biggest night of the year, and he heard a baby crying. So he followed the noise, and he sees that there's a little baby crying, and the baby's 9-year-old sister is there trying to soothe the baby, but he found out that the mother, because the baby had fallen asleep, so the mother had gone to shul in order to hear Kol Nidre, in order to daven on to pray on this the night of Yom Kippur, and she left her 9-year-old watching the baby, and now the rabbi of the town heard the baby crying, so he went and he saw that the 9-year-old sister doesn't know how to prepare a bottle, so he went to the kitchen, prepared a bottle, gave a bottle, soothed the baby. He was about to leave, and he saw that the 9-year-old, the girl, didn't want him to leave. She was a little kid, so he stayed there the whole night. The whole night he just stayed there until the prayer was over, and he just stayed there with the baby and the child. And that's a Mussar outlook. Praying is a beautiful thing, but it does not have the same weight as kindness. And you see a child in distress and a baby, you can't just leave them and go fulfill your ritualistic obligation of prayer. Prayer is nice, but there's nothing that has the same scale as kindness and taking care of a baby who has no one else to take care of him.
I thought you were obligated to pray.
You are obligated to pray, but there's a conflict here, right? You can't do both. You can pray with the congregation and take care of the baby. You can only do one. Mm-hmm. What's more important? So most people say, well, it's Yom Kippur. How could you possibly miss it? The most momentous day of the year in the Jewish calendar. How could you possibly miss it? Well, you can't, unless there's something that overrides that. And Mussar teaches us is that the most important, or the objective, the end goal of everything we do ritualistically is all to make us better persons, make us better people. That's the end goal. If you focus too much on the ritualistic aspect of it, and you don't think at all for a second about what it's supposed to do to you, how it's supposed to make you a better person. If you do a mitzvah, you do a commandment, you listen to the Torah, but you don't ever intend to become a better person, you miss the boat.
Okay, based on that, Rabbi, the mother wasn't obligated to pray, but the rabbi was. So, the man was.
Well, the mother She left. She's not part of the story. We don't know what happened to
Okay.
her.
I'm just going by what you said. I'm
Yeah,
not
but,
thinking-
but Rabbi Salanter, even though he was the rabbi of the town, he was the number one leader, Jewish leader of his generation. But he was the one who exemplified this idea, or this idea is emblematic of the Mussar approach. Mussar approach is you have to become a better person. That is the reason why we do anything in Judaism. You have to become a better person. You have to perfect yourself. That is it. That is it. You have to become ethical and character perfection. That overrides everything. Well,
I would
I don't
think
know.
in the eyes of Hashem, that would be, the mitzvah would take precedent.
Well, they're both mitzvahs.
I'm sure he davened while he was taking care of the child.
The mitzvah, taking the child, taking care of the child.
I was thinking of the abandoned congregation.
And yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point because I assume that they probably didn't start without him.
So they didn't start?
And we're worried about him.
I don't know what the
Conversations.
Though you have a precedent already in your story of that he's clearly davening, he's not leading services on Yom Kippur, because the previous story was the person with the Mussar next to him. So therefore, it's not him that's leading the congregation, because we can learn from the earlier story that therefore it was him davening, and the community wasn't obligated to him. So therefore, you don't have.
This is what we do all day. By the way, when we learn Talmud.
So he's not like impinging on the community, because then you would have a different precedent, and then he would worry about that kind of value of competing of still bettering the community. Therefore, he had the ability to stay there.
And presumably,
What was that again?
such a
That
great rabbi would
that
have
was
knowledge
that
of
was
how
Talmudic
to use it.
analytics.
Yeah, I know.
Where you say, well, the previous story, it was evident that he wasn't the one who was leading the congregation, right? Because he was looking into both stories are on Yom Kippur. And therefore, it must be that he wasn't leading the congregation. That's what we do. By the way, when we learn Talmud, we do that all the time.
See why I like Talmud.
As loud as possible.
He was once traveling in a wagon with his students, with a bunch of his prime disciples, and the students were talking about most erudite matters of Talmud, of philosophy, of all these grandiose ideas, and he's talking about the most simple matters. And this is Rabbi Salanter, who is the greatest Jewish leader of his generation, and he's talking about the most simple matters. It's like, for example, you have a collection of the greatest rabbis, and one of the rabbis, the leader of them all, is talking about sports, or he's talking about the news, or a gossip magazine. Doesn't make any sense. What's happening? Why would he talk about such matters of literal no importance? And so he told the students, "What do you mean? It's us. Yeah, we're scholars, but there is a wagon driver. You can't just talk about things and leave him out of the conversation. You can't just talk amongst yourselves and ignore the guy who's sitting in front driving the car." So he would talk about ideas in order to not disinclude someone from the conversation. He lowered the level that everyone could participate. Once again, that's demonstrative of the Mussar outlook. He was once in Kovna, where a place where he was a rabbi. One of the people of the community invited him for a meal Friday night, right, Shabbat dinner. And they get home from the synagogue after praying, and they go to see that the table's beautifully set, but the challah, the breads, weren't covered. As we know, on Friday night, you always cover the challah, right? So the host was all embarrassed. The rabbi comes, and the challah's not covered. So he shouts out to his wife, Yidina, which is a derogatory way of saying things. What happened? Why isn't she not covered? Why the challah's not covered? So she runs in. She says, "Oh, I forgot," and and she covers it. So Rabbi Salanter says to him, "Why do we cover the challah on Friday night? Why do we cover it?" So the guy's a little bit surprised by the question. Well, of course, why we cover it. Because really, bread is more of a higher class food. In Judaism, there's different levels of food for different brachot, for different blessings. And really, we should make the kiddush on the bread. But because on Friday night we do it on the wine, so we cover the bread as to not embarrass the bread. So Rabbi Salanter says, don't your ears hear what your mouth is saying? If the Torah of Judaism, if we're worried not to embarrass the bread, how could you embarrass your wife? It's like the most ironic thing. You're embarrassing your wife for not fulfilling the custom of not embarrassing the bread.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it?
Next time
Came
Malcolm
up
yells
with
at me,
that,
I'll
my
tell him.
goodness.
What?
He came up with that?
Yeah. Which is obviously, people have a tendency to ignore interpersonal relationships and focus just on the black and white. And Mussar teaches you the most important thing that you need to do is focus on how you relate to other people and how you're growing as an ethical and moral person. This is a great story. So he was once by a wedding, and he was washing his hands. And we know before you eat bread, you have to wash your hands twice on the right hand, twice on the left hand, up to the joint. But in the Talmud it says it's good, it's preferable to wash a lot of water, right? Buckets and buckets and buckets. Well, not really, but preferable. And he was once by a wedding, and his students, he did just barely to the joint. They say to him, "What's happening? How come you don't do like it says in the Talmud? It says in the Jewish sources, classical Jewish sources. You're supposed to use a lot of water. Use use plentiful, ample amounts of water." So he said to them, obviously there's no tap. All the water that came in, someone had to schlep it from the well. He says, "I have no right to do above and beyond the call of duty and pour more water on my hand when that water is manually imported in here by someone. I have no right. I cannot exercise my right to use more water and be above and beyond what I need to do if someone had to schlep that water, and I'll have to schlep more water in after I exhaust that water." Once again, the Mussar attitude is that your most important thing is you have to become a better person, a more moral person, more ethical person. And don't focus on the black and white and miss what the goal of these ideas, of these mitzvot are trying to do to you. He was famous of saying, your heart is reshus hayachid, private domain, where your heart is personal. But your face, your countenance, that's public domain. That is something you always have to have a countenance, a pleasant countenance. When you meet people, you smile at them. I don't care what you're going through. You have no right to take your face and be sour, be in a bad mood.
And make somebody else.
Yeah. So I know myself, I remember my grandfather, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, we got to him later, he was a famous Mussar master of the past 100 years. I'll talk about him. He wrote 35 books about Mussar. He was a tremendous Mussar master. So I remember when he was sick, his body was being ravaged by cancer. 90 years old. There's pipes everywhere. He's in the hospital. Must have been going through tremendous pain. But his smile was from here till China. That's what your face is public domain. You have no right to litter, quote unquote, on your face. Your face has. That's one of his famous sayings. Another one of his famous sayings. Someone else's physical needs are my spiritual needs. Someone else's gashmias, which is his materialistic needs, that is my spirituality. My spirituality is to focus on what other person needs physically. Like, for example, we know that if you go to Israel, they have something called like a minyan factory, which is a place where there's a high concentration of Jews. Right? So they have minions all the time. So they have a factory. It means they have a bunch of rooms, and around the clock there's always people praying. So there's always one guy who's outside who says in Yiddish, says, "Shangadavin, Shangadavin, Shangadavin, did you daven? Did you daven?" So, like, I always picture Rabbi Salanter standing outside, Shanki Essen, did you eat? Did you sleep? Did you drink? Someone else's physical, material needs is my spiritual need, is my spiritual responsibility. That was another one of his famous sayings. And this is the classic. This next one's the classic. Late at night, he was busy studying. He sees that someone else in the neighborhood, the light's on. So he walks there, and he looks, and it's the shoemaker. And he's hammering away at the shoes, trying to, fix the shoes. So he walks in, and he says, why are you up so late? It's 2 in the morning. What, you fixing shoes now? So the shoemaker told him, he pointed to the candle, obviously there's no electricity, right? He pointed to the candle's lit. He said, famously, Kol zman shahaner dolek, od efshar lo taken. So long as the candle is burning, we could always fix. And Rabbi Salanter took this saying, this idiom, this maxim that this shoemaker had said, and it was his motto. So long as a person's flame is still burning, so long as you're still alive, right, you could still fix. You could still fix yourself, make yourself a better person. Kozman shaner dolek odev shalatek. You could still fix it. Which I like the story in a double way, because A, there's the story and there's the lesson. As long as that fire is still burning, we could always still fix and improve ourselves. But I think the story in itself is demonstrative of what a Mussar man's all about. Let's say someone told us this line. Someone said, yeah, as long as the candle's burning, you could still fix shoes. It's very clever. It's a nice way of saying things. But Rabbi Salanter, because he's a Mussar man, he's constantly prowling. He's on the look to try to make himself a better person. So anything he comes across, he's going to use it for his own personal growth and perfection. So some shoemaker who's, not necessarily someone that you would think you would go to learn lessons from, but the shoemaker, he's looking for him for lessons, and he said this line, and he used it as his own personal motto. So long as it's possible, so long as the fire is still burning, you could still fix. Right? That shows us a little bit about the Mussar outlook. The Mussar outlook is that person always has to be looking to make himself a better person. One last saying from Rabbi Salanter, and we'll talk a little bit about my grandfather. He said like this: before I started learning Mussar, before he started learning the wisdom, the ideas of Mussar, I thought the entire world is sinners, but I'm pious. The entire world. So once he started learning the ideas, he started becoming a Mussar person, he realized I'm also a sinner. Because you focus on a little bit, the real Muslim has to know his shortcomings, has to know what he's lacking in. So once you know that, you realize you're not so perfect after all. Then, after I spent a long time learning Mussar, learning that is a Mussar, I realized that I'm a sinner, but everyone else, they're righteous. Because the outlook is you have to look at everyone as them being better than you, them having something over you. So that's a little bit about the founder of the Mussar movement, a little bit about him. I think we all have a little bit more of a clear picture about what Mussar is. And I want to talk a little bit about my grandfather, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, and a little bit about his relationship with Mussar. Do you have any questions yet? Comments?
Are there any books on Mussar?
Hundreds. Hundreds. Yes. There's classical books, there's contemporary books, there's books written in every language. I know my grandfather wrote more than 35 books, but they're all in Hebrew. Actually, as we'll see in the story maybe, he wrote books in German and Swedish, because he was a savant of sorts. He was very, very, he was a brilliant person. You could converse with him in 8 languages,
8 languages?
Yeah, but he was a fantastic person. He was unbelievable. Wrote 35 books. How many people you know that wrote 35 books?
When was he born?
He was born in 1914 in Berlin. His father was a professor in the University of Berlin, professor of languages. His father spoke 12 languages. Yeah, his father wrote books also. Eugene Wolbe, you could Google him.
Well, what a famous name you have.
Oh yeah, Wolbe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. There's actually not so many Wolbes out there.
No, that's
Almost.
true.
Yeah, it's a very unique name. My grandfather was an only son of someone who was an only son of someone who was an only son. So who knows how many people have that name.
And he moved to New York, or he moved to...
I'll get this right. So he was born in Berlin. His father was a professor, a member of the aristocracy of Berlin. He was a professor. He wrote books. He was really, the crowbar mustache and everything, and the top hat and the cane. And he was very antagonistic towards Torah Judaism, his father. But from a young age, my grandfather was someone who was always trying to learn Torah, always trying to grow. He would give, he grew up Reform. but he would like give sermons at the age of 10 and 12. He would give sermons to his friends in the synagogue, in the temple. At the age of 16, he wrote his first book. Right, he preceded me by 7 years with that. In German, about the 3 relationships that people encounter in their lives. Right, man to other man, right? Interpersonal relationship, man and God, right, relating to the Almighty, man and himself. How you relate to yourself, which is obviously an idea which seems a little foreign to us, but that's one of the themes about Mussar, to develop a relationship with yourself. At the age of 18, he was in Switzerland, and he had heard a Mussar talk by someone who had come in from Poland to deliver that speech. And he was blown away. He was blown away by this talk. And afterwards, he went over to the man and profusely thanked him for this tremendous talk and tremendous influence that he had on him. And he said to him, "You think what I said was special? You should go to Poland and go to the famous Mir Yeshiva and go hear the famous Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz." Now, to tell my grandfather in 1934 to go to Poland was like telling one of your kids, go move to Nicaragua. You know, the distance between Germany and Poland is not so much. It's Europe. It's the same neighborhood, right? But intellectually, ideologically, it was miles away. Anyhow, my grandfather had this interest, so he decided, why not? He'll write his father a letter asking him if he could go to Poland to study there in yeshiva. So he gets a response a few weeks later in the mail. Yeah, go. And he was shocked. He was shocked. And later on, he discovered, we all know, like I always say about myself, I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious, right? I'm not superstitious, I'm just a little stitious. His father was superstitious. His father had gone to a palm reader, a fortune teller, that week that he received the letter. The fortune teller, the woman told him, she looked at his palm, she said, your son is going to make a request from you this week. Grant him the request. And that week, he received the letter from my grandfather, can I go to yeshiva? So he was superstitious. He wrote it back, go. So he came to yeshiva, and the Mir Yeshiva is like the Harvard of yeshivas. The Harvard of yeshivas. And Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz, Mussar master. He totally changed my grandfather, the course of my grandfather's life. Even though Rabbi Levavitz passed away in 1936, he was only with him for 2 years, but his whole life he was studying his works. He considered himself a lifelong student of Rabbi Levavitz. There is where his foundations in Mussar really dug in. In 1938, as a German national, as a German citizen, they were all bounced out of Poland. We all know, Hitler was stirring up a lot of vitriol, right, towards the rest of Europe. Everyone who was a German citizen in Poland was sent away, right? Now, in 1938, you're a German citizen, you're kicked out of Poland. Where exactly you're going? You're not going back to... It's not such a smart idea, especially in hindsight, for a German to go back to Germany in 1938. So he was a little bit, in a little bit of a quandary. What do you do? Anyhow, that week he had received an offer to go to Sweden. Sweden was neutral. He went to Sweden. He was offered that week. He moved to Sweden. He served as a rabbi in Sweden. He learned Swedish. He wrote a book in Swedish. He lived there for 8 years, and he survived. In 1946, he moved to Israel. He opened up a yeshiva, which he had headed for 35 years in a place called Ber Yaakov in Israel. He moved to Jerusalem in 1982, where he passed away in 2005. Now, he had, at his funeral, he was such a major name in the Israeli rabbinic circles. There were 100,000 people by his funeral.
100,000.
100,000. It was an enormous, some Pesach, enormous funeral. He was a super duper name in the circles of Israeli rabbinic leaders. My grandfather. My father actually moved to the United States. That's why my father's Israeli, but he moved to the United States. So that's why I'm American.
So your father was born in Israel?
Father born in Israel, yes. My father's Israeli, but he moved to the United States, and I was born in New York in 1986.
Nice story.
Yeah. Now, my grandfather wrote 35 books on Mussar, all Mussar topics. His magnum opus was a book called Alei Shur, which means, it's the verse in the end of Genesis, which means on top of the wall. Which means, he writes in his introduction, I'm going to take you on top of the wall, we'll go for a little stroll together, and we're going to look inside and see what the great Mussar man looks like. And it's a detailed guidebook, step-by-step instructions how to become the perfect you. The ultimate self-help book. Now, I always say about this book is that it wasn't a bunch of ideas that he collected, he researched, he looked them up, and it was a description of the journey that he took in his journey towards perfection. He spent 28 years writing these 2 volumes. You know, even though he wrote many hundreds of articles and essays that are some published, some not yet published, in manuscript form. But this was a description of his process from where he started, you know, and it's a detailed guidebook, step by step, of character perfection and Mussar excellence. Some fascinating things about him. He was so, his mind was so organized. His mind was so organized that I looked at his manuscripts, and he writes pages upon pages without crossing out. He could go through hundreds of pages, not one word's crossing out. It's something fantastic. Like, to me, when I write something, you write down you write pen and paper, you write something, you think of a better word, you cross it out, you write a different word, you think of a different idea. It's not exactly, because it's not exactly organized in your head. His head was so organized. He was a brilliant person, but besides that, he was so organized that he never would write something unless he knew that was the perfect word. And you could see, like, literally, notebooks upon notebooks, not one word's crossed out. And yes, that's my grandfather. That's why I have a special familial affinity towards Mussar. Okay, so now we discussed already. Mussar is the Jewish philosophy, the Jewish way of self-discovery, ethical and character perfection. I want to show you. You can pass these around. This is part of your homework booklet. Homework? What? Did you say that, Rabbi? Recant. Take it back. I'm out of here. Homework?
At my age, homework.
I will not be back.
Now, the reason why I want to show it to you, because I want to look at the first page. The first page, this one. It's a diamond. It's a diamond. Oh, yeah, we'll share it together. That's perfect.
Let's share.
On top, you see it's the positive traits. Oh, thank you. We have the positive traits on top and the negative traits on bottom, right? There's a tremendous collection of traits, like I showed you guys earlier, the list of good character traits and bad character traits. Now, these traits, they're innate. They're inborn, right? It's from day one you have them. Everyone has their own collection of good and bad character traits. My grandfather's philosophy was that everyone has one fundamental good trait, that's this one in the box, and one fundamental bad trait. Now, being that traits have so much overlap, there's so much overlap amongst the different traits, that he espoused that if a person isolates his number one trait, and in descending order, his number 2, his number 3, his number 4 or 5, his top 10 traits in ascending and descending order, and conversely, his negative traits, what's the fundamental negative trait, and in ascending order, what's number 2, number 3, number 4, he could use this information, this is the self-discovery part, he could use this information in his quest towards knowing who you are, and once you know who you are, you know what you're dealing with, how do you improve yourself? How do you perfect yourself? So what he always taught is that you have to spend time, find out what is your best midah, what's your best characteristic trait, and conversely, what's your worst characteristic trait. If we take a look at the second page, I wrote down a sampling of different good and bad traits that I want you over the next week to rate yourself where you're holding in these good traits and bad traits. The reason why, and obviously this is not an easy thing to write, to fill out this diamond form, but keep it with you. Maybe one day, maybe you are that organized. Maybe you do know where you're holding. Maybe you do know your top 10 good and bad midos. And if you do, that's great. Write it out. But if not, think about it. Use it as something which I like it because, and if we're getting started in the Mussar process, the first thing we need to do is start thinking about ourselves, thinking about what we do, thinking about where we're holding. That's why I have over here in the back, I want you to rate yourself because you probably never thought, well, how kind am I? Most people don't think about those kind of things. On a scale of 1 to 10, where am I holding in humility? How many people have ever thought of that? How many people have sat down for 10 minutes to think about that? Most people haven't. That is the first exercise in the Mussar process, to start thinking in that kind of way. On a scale of 1 to 10, am I kind? Well, I don't know. Most people, you ask them, you just shoot from the hip. Are you kind or not? Are you kind or not? Most of them wouldn't know. They'd have to think about it. That's the idea. We're slowly training ourselves to think in a Mussar kind of way. Fine, so let's continue. We'll get to the exact detailing of what the homework is at the end. So now, Mussar is composed of two components. On one hand, we have the theoretical part. On the other hand, we have the practical part. The illustration, the best illustration to illustrate this is, you have two kids, two children. All children know that fire is hot. All right? Everyone knows. You don't touch the fire is hot. But now let's say you have one kid who knows that. He knows it intellectually, but he actually never touched the fire. Does he have any doubt whether or not the fire is hot? No, he knows. But his knowledge, his belief isn't as strong as the kid who's actually touched the fire and felt it and had to shoot his hand back. That kid's knowledge is much stronger. Similarly, we have the intellectual aspect of Mussar, learning in a macro way about the different kinds of midos and thinking about where we're holding in relation to these different characteristics. That's the easy part of Mussar. That's also pretty hard, but that's the easy part of Mussar. The easy part of Mussar is to think about, okay, there's something called humility, and there's something called kindness, and what does kindness mean? What's the definition of kindness? What are the applications of kindness? Where am I holding in kindness? Where do I want to be in kindness? How do I get there? Right? Let's throw this question around the table. How would a person become more kind? What do you say, Israel?
Do something kind.
There you go. That is theoretical Mussar. We think about ideas, we think about kindness, we think about ways to improve our kindness. That is, and over this series, hopefully we'll do a lot of that. It's a lot of brainstorming. How do we improve on these characteristics that we're dealing with? That's theoretical. The practical is every day making sure I do 5 acts of kindness. Every day, no matter what. If you can't find anything, go to the library, put away books. Right? That would be a way to do it. That's much harder. I'm going to make myself a more kind person. No matter what, I'm going to commit 5 acts of kindness every day in order to make myself more of a kind person. That's fine. Doing it is much harder. What happens if you can't think of any acts of kindness to do? You didn't fulfill your quota? You go to the library, you pick up books, you hang up 5 books on the shelf. That on the right place. Good luck with that. That is the practical. Huh?
Or you can go gather the books and give them to Michelle.
Come here to the shul and do something.
Yeah, I don't care what you do. Go to the soup kitchen, whatever you want. But that is the practical aspect of Mussar. And over time, we'll test the waters with both of them. Let's talk about Mussar methodology. There's a few very important things. I think Israel touched on one of them, the most important one. The methodology of how Mussar works. How do we become more benevolent, kind, considerate, generous, appreciative, humble, hospitable? Or, conversely, how do we become less impatient, less quick, easily angered? The answer is by doing acts of kindness will become more kind.
Kind of just do it.
Just do it. That's the most important thing in the realm of self-perfection, is that the actions, they're the ones who influence the temperament. They're the ones who change conduct. I always like to say, by way of analogy, 1983, the movie Trading Places. Rings a bell? It's one of the best movies for like a rabbi who wants to think of nice ideas or good illustrations. There's so much in that movie. Basically, these investment bankers, they take their star prize prodigy from Harvard who works for them, who does does their trading for them, does their commodities trading for them, and they take him and they switch places. They make a bet between them. They switch places between him and some homeless beggar who is Eddie Murphy, right? And they take one of them and they take this guy who was living with the chauffeur and living in his fancy apartment in New York City. Or maybe it wasn't New York City. It was with New York City. And they take the homeless guy and they switch places. And they take the homeless guy off the street and they start educating him. They give him a suit and tie. They give him a fancy butler and a chauffeur and a nice house. And this guy just came off the street. He walks into the house. And he starts putting stuff in his pocket like this, everywhere, every pocket. Because he still has a street attitude. I always like to say, like, it's very easy to take the guy off the street and put him in the fancy house. But it's very hard to take the street attitude out of him. And over time in the movie, you see he becomes more and more of a respectable person, more and more moral person, more of a like high class person, high society.
Because of his environment?
Yeah, and that's just the environment. I always say, I told the guys, I was in Temple Beth Tikva in Clear Lake. I said, I came to Houston. I said, I'm from New York. In New York, the drivers are terrible. And here, the drivers are so courteous. And they're like, what? They're not courteous? But anyhow, I'm from New York. And Israel. New York and Israel for sure share that in common. That the drivers,
it's also the worst place.
Yeah, they drive like animals in Israel, like animals.
Would probably drive better.
And I say, how come people from New York, I tell you, the things I've heard in the street in New York, you would never hear in the great state of Texas. Why? Because people from New York they're just much more, it's a much more of a cutthroat environment.
Well, also in Texas, if you have that bad of an attitude, you can get shot.
That's true.
More of
Yeah,
what
it's
environment?
good to
Of
live in
what
a state
did
where
you say? They're more where?
bad man gets
Cutthroat,
somebody clipped down
which
again.
means like it's like a competitive environment.
One every couple years.
Everybody tries to get everybody.
Everyone, it's like,
I'm going to get you before you get me.
yeah, like you drive and I'm telling you, I was once making a left turn and the guy said some of the nastiest things you could ever imagine out the window to me, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. You would never get that in Texas. And everyone knows people from Texas. They're more hospitable. They're kind. They're less, in New Yorkers, they're very, they're more
My
proper.
husband's from New York, and I remember the first time we went up there at Christmas, and we went into a store, and a lady bought something, and she wanted it tied up, and she said, put a string around it, and she threw it at her. She says, take the damn box, or don't take the damn box. And I said, can we stay and watch them? I never saw anybody do that.
We had moved here to Houston. I went back to Toronto to see my family, and when I went to a supermarket, and I'm standing in line, and all of a sudden a lady there is pushing ahead of me, and like I was stunned. I says, this would never happen in Houston. Like the way this was, I was just completely stunned. Or if you go into a restaurant in Toronto, the waitresses, forget it. They're not polite or anything. It's similar to New York, but in a different way.
I actually find that people my wife's from Toronto, so like I said, I find people from Toronto to be so nice also, like so courteous, like drivers, they do the wave, the wave.
Well, what year was that?
It's because it's so hot here, we just can't get too worked up over anything.
Yeah, and you know what, that might
That's really what it
but people are just, they're just nice. They're like, it's like a homey place. It's like a homey place. It's a homey environment.
Southern mentality,
Yes,
hospitality.
hospitality.
Yeah.
But are people here like, physiologically any different than they are in New York? What would you say?
I think it's a slower pace
I'm
here.
from Ohio. I'm from Ohio. They're very nice over there.
But physiologically, no, they're up where
Obviously not. So what is it? It's just that's the environment that you in, and you acclimate to your environment. So I was thinking, if you acclimate to your environment, how much more, which means that the environment influences who we are. Like if you're going to be around people who are more hospitable, you're going to be more hospitable yourself. How much more so if you're going to act hospitable, you yourself are going to be involved in hospitable things, how much more so you become more of a hospitable person. So that's that. Environment, and much more so actions, they influence the person. Now this is very important. Very, very important. Mussar methodology. We always have to take small, bite-sized steps. You try to do it all in one, you try to just say, I'm becoming a better, less impetuous person. I'm going to do everything calm. I'm going to count to 10 before I say anything. It's not going to happen if you're a very impetuous person.
What an impetuous thing to attempt.
Exactly. If you want to have deep, fundamental, long-lasting change, it has to be done slowly. If it goes slowly, you'll be able to build upon your successes, and you'll be able to. What goes in slowly will remain, right? Slowly but surely. If you try to do too big of a jump, you try to do too much at once, you're going to fail. You're going to fall flat down on your face.
For me, it seems like to work on one mido, even if it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, however long it takes, to really work with it, feel it, experience it in everyday life. That's just the way I feel about it.
That's for sure a good way to do it. You spend 4 weeks on one topic. 4 weeks on that's slow. But I want to tell you a story.
Okay.
My grandmother, my father's mother, grew up in a place called Slobodka. Probably no one's ever heard of it because it's a small city in Lithuania. But it had one of the biggest yeshivas in the world before the war. It relocated to Hebron, they have branches everywhere now. But it was one of the primary yeshivas before World War II. Her father was the dean of the yeshiva, my grandmother's father. He spent 2 years on one midah, on one characteristic trait.
Wasn't it how to smile or something?
Oh yes. He spent 2 years on Heve Merkabel, it's called Adam B'Sever Panim Yafot, which is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, which means you should greet every person with a pleasant countenance. He spent 2 years working on that. He spent 2 years on one characteristic. That's going to stay. And even when he was in the camps, he was in the most treacherous situation human beings have ever been in World War II and the Holocaust. He never once lost his smile. Even he was burnt alive. The Nazis burnt alive in 1944, but in a hospital. But there is firsthand accounting of what he was like hours before he passed away. He was going from bed to bed, comforting people, making them feel better, always with a smile on his face, always calm, because he had spent so much time working on it. I mean, if I would tell you guys, 2 years on just greeting someone with a pleasant countenance, but yeah, it could even extend to that. Obviously, we won't spend the next 2 years on one characteristic here.
For me, I'd have to, probably.
No, but the deeper and deeper you internalize these ideas into yourself, the more permanent it'll be.
As long as the candle's burning.
Exactly. As long as the candle's burning. By way of illustration, in the temple, the ramp to the temple was in steps. Now, if you know the area, the square footage of the temple wasn't that big. And the most dominating thing was the 65-foot ramp that went up to the altar. And if any one of us were there, we would say, oh, wait a minute, why can't you build like a nice spiral staircase or some other way of getting... It dominating the entire temple is this massive ramp to walk up to the altar. There's got to be a more efficient way of getting up there, more like with tapping up all the room. How come it's a ramp? How come it's not steps? So there could be other ways to do it. So there's two very pertinent ideas that answer this question. Number one, if you were to take a tennis ball and you would put it on your steps, you would secure it on one of the steps, you would leave it there. And you would go on a 2-month vacation. Right? Everywhere. Caribbean, South America, Italy. You touch the whole world. You come back, you open up your house, you go to the step, the ball will still be there. Right? Because there's a plateau and there's a step, and there's roof, it'll stay there. In Judaism, we teach that if you're not growing up, if you're not growing, you're going backwards. You're moving in the wrong direction. You're degenerating, so to speak. You're always in perpetual motion. It's like a treadmill. Like if you try to sit in the treadmill, you're just going to move backwards. You have to constantly walk in order to keep up and to grow. That's the first idea from the ramp in the temple, which is important for us. We always have to be growing people. We can't just take a few months off from our pursuits of Mussar and character perfection. We can't say, okay, fine, I'm on vacation now, got no patience for it, Rabbi Walby, I don't want to hear about it, come back to me September 1st. You can't do that. You'll regress. That's the first lesson. The second lesson we can learn from the ramp in the temple is that steps. Some engineer decided that 8.5 inches is the most broad, if you take the most broad population block, that's the proper step, that's the most comfortable step for them. 8.5 inches. But you have young children who are small bodies. 8.5 inches is very high for them. It's very hard for little kids to walk up steps. They should have smaller steps. Similarly, the elderly. They also need smaller steps. On the other hand, you have high school kids who need 1.5 feet in order to stretch their muscles. But in the environment that we live in is that you can't accommodate everyone. You can't accommodate everyone. So what they do is they take the broadest population block, right, which is anyone between the age of 18 and whatever, and they try to come up with the height which is perfect for everyone, or as many people as possible. But a ramp, there's no predetermined amount of elevation, amount of ascension that's needed. You could go an inch a year and you're still moving up. You could go a foot a day and you're still moving up. In Judaism, we don't believe in cookie-cutter, predetermined, pre-designed rates of improvement. In Judaism, you have to go at your own pace. You have to move not too fast, not too slow, whatever is comfortable for you. Don't push too hard. Don't force yourself to do things which you're not ready to do. On one hand, don't go too slow because then you could achieve more. Whatever is right for you. And I always like to say the story. I know it's already 9 o'clock, but I'll just quickly finish off.
You had about 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So there's a story. So I'll skip the story.
We'll give you 5.
Give you 5, okay. So my grandfather, in 1972, after the Yom Kippur War, he spent his time going to Israeli bases, Israeli camps in the Sinai desert. He would go there and he would speak and he would give lectures and give discourses and talk to people, and he would try to, do outreach to speak to these soldiers who went through harrowing experiences during the war. He noticed they were flying very low, very close to the surface, and he asked the pilot of the Israeli plane, "How come we're flying so low?" So he said, "We're trying to avoid Egyptian radar. So they fly very low, they fly under the radar." So the Muslim asked, "What does he do with such a story?" He says, that is the way we need to grow. That is the way we need to change. You have to fly under the radar of all the forces that are trying to stop you from changing. We have so many forces. We have the Yetzer Hara wants us to do bad things. We have our own inertia which wants us to remain as stagnant as possible. We have our modes of conduct that we're used to, that are very resistant to change. You have to fly under the radar. Just do it quietly. Do it. No one needs to know about it. Do it as quietly as measured as possible in order to not cause to fly under the radar. That was a very cute idea of how we're supposed to approach our own spiritual growth. And once again, this story is indicative of how a Mussar person thinks. Right? Someone tells him something that has to do with Egyptian radar, and he uses that as an idea of how a person is supposed to grow. then he used other ideas he used also from airplanes. He says, airplane, you start going very slowly, and you're flying, you're just going on the ground. You're not flying. But once you take off, you're able to ascend at a much greater rate. You start slowly, and eventually you pick up speed. Okay, so I just want to give an outline of what was, that's the introduction to Mussar. I want to give an outline of what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks. We're going to go trait by trait. We have a whole list of traits over here in the back. I don't know what we'll start with, but that'll be next week. We'll start with one of the traits, and we're going to do a few things with it. We're going to define it. The most important thing is to get a definition of what it means. Which some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them are a little bit more complex. Like, for example, the definition of kindness. Who wants to throw out a definition for what kindness means?
Putting others before yourself.
Very good. I like that.
Greet someone nicely.
What's the definition of kindness? Define kindness. So you said putting someone before yourself, thinking about others. Thinking about others. That's the definition I would give. I would probably say it in this way, only because this is what I heard from my grandfather. He's had a story, and everyone loves stories. The day before Pesach, the day before Passover, someone comes over to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I have a halachic question I want to ask you. The rabbi says, Pesach asked what Shabbos would be the question. He says, he wants to know the 4 cups of wine. Everyone knows we drink the 4 cups of wine on the night of the Seder. He wants to know what is the halachic permissibility of using milk.
Milk. Not with brisket.
Milk.
Can you use milk
It's a little
for the
safer.
4? Right, that's very good also. It's a good point because that's a little bit. So he said, he thinks about it. He says, no. He gives her a lot of money. He says, go buy yourself wine. Now his wife is there. He's like, Rabbi, I understand they didn't have enough money to buy wine. But he didn't need to give him so much money. He gave him so much more money than the amount it would cost to buy 4 cups of wine. So he said, from their question, he asked, could he drink milk? So obviously he's not eating meat. He obviously doesn't have any money to buy meat. So from his question, we could see he doesn't have meat either. So therefore, I give him money to buy a whole, not just wine, also
So it
meat.
wasn't just wine, it was all kinds of food.
Yeah.
Meal.
So my grandfather said, this rabbi exemplifies kindness. Because kindness is to try to superimpose yourself upon the other person. Try to figure out what is he going through. Someone asks you a question. You don't say, oh, I don't know, should you use milk or not? I don't know how a rabbi would approach that. That's a complicated question. Well, probably not. It says wine. Should you use milk? I don't know. But this rabbi says, what is this person going through? He's asking me this question. It must be that he doesn't have meat, like you said.
There has to be a boundary, though, because you could be a fool, too.
Well, for sure. We don't ever want to. We don't condone that in any way. Yeah, you can't be a fool. You have to be smart. You have to be sharp. But that's how we define kindness. Superimposing yourself on someone else, trying to figure out what they're going through and what their needs are. Don't say, okay, fine. Someone asked me, pass me the ketchup. So you pass me the ketchup. Is that kindness? That's not kindness. That's derech eretz. That's just respect. Kindness is to think about what the person is going through. Try to think. Okay, look at someone. What?
Put yourself in their shoes.
Put yourself in their shoes, exactly. What is this person going through? That's the definition of kindness. So that's the first thing. We want to define what characteristic is. Number 2, we want to learn a little about it. We want to get an inventory of where we're holding in that midah. We want to think of ways we can improve. And the last thing is always homework.
Oh, God.
Okay, so the homework that I want to give this week is very hard. This is probably the hardest thing to do, is to fill out your own diamond, your own chart of where you're holding. What's your number 1 characteristic, good characteristic? What's your number 1 bad? That's very hard. It's a life's effort. But I want to get you guys thinking about these kind of things. I want you to start thinking about your midos, about your characteristics. And if you know for sure what your best characteristic is, go ahead, write it out. But this is something that I want you guys to keep. I want everyone here, I want y'all to keep with you throughout your spiritual growth. You'll be able to fill in more and more of your spiritual self.
Now, you want us to fill just this and this, or you want?
No, this is number one, your good one. This is number one, your bad one.
Right.
This is number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So it's 10. 10 good, 10 bad. It's not such an easy task.
No, that's
I'll be honest
hard.
with you, my older brother, Rabbi Arya Wolbe, he has his filled out. Myself, I don't have mine filled out.
Just this and this.
We're still working on it.
Do we fill out all of these?
Yeah,
or
fill them all.
just this and this?
Yes, yes.
What,
No,
yes, what?
No, because we have
Yes,
to
fill them
all
all
of
out. There's
So these are the positive up here.
one over here.
And here are the
That's
negative.
your best characteristic.
You're positive and you're negative here, right?
Yes, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4, this is number
Oh,
5.
so okay, so
Yeah.
all of these are your
So
positive.
you have to
all
fill
of
out
these are negative.
literally the whole
But
page.
you have to do this page.
Yeah, this one's to be a little easier. This, I want everyone to do if they can, if you have time this week. It'll be a great exercise. And it's one thing, we're training our brains to think differently. We're training our brain to do things that our brain never did. We want to take, there's a list of good midos, of good characteristics, a list of bad characteristics, and everyone, you don't have to share this with anyone, by the way. You don't have to bring it in and have me sign it. That's not what it's about. It's just an exercise that you could do yourself to try to see, where am I holding? And you have to think about it. Well, alacrity, zrizut. Do I procrastinate a lot? Am I speedy? Am I resolute in my decisions? Alacrity means when a person has an idea.
Thinking of something.
Exactly.
That what? I'm
What?
sorry.
He
You
has
have an idea, you do it, right? How would you describe it?
Yeah, like alacrity is a.
You don't
is-
pro-
is
you don't
leaping to do
procrastinate.
kind of something.
You don't procrastinate, exactly.
It's like Abraham, when he went to go greet the angels, he met them with alacrity. He jumped to them. You jump to it. You kind of like you move at like hep to kind of idea. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal you.
I'm happy that you just.
It's just like because I learned the word alacrity in my Cognitive class and on that story, and that's how I know what the word means. 'Cause I hadn't learned it prior to rabbinical school.
Well, that's interesting. Order
So-
and
so-
Seder.
Yeah, yes, Seder means
That's what
order.
Seder.
But it's an exercise, which is a fascinating exercise, where you have to sit by yourself for a few minutes, maybe in a few hours,
minutes?
and think, where am I holding with regards to all these?
This is very different than I've ever done.
But having done the second page, doesn't the first one become
No,
more
because
self-evident?
because
I mean, really, you
well,
can
this-
kind of go
these-
down the
this
chart
is
and
just-
see which ones are the
well,
strongest.
this is
link.
just a sampling of different midos.
There's more midos.
Okay.
And also, like, this is an exercise, and maybe we can have one of these at the end, and you can see if you've changed or how you've grown or if you feel that there's a change. This is a picture of a person's spiritual self. This is it. If you fill it out, that's who you are. That's who you are as a spiritual. Next week, God willing, I'll bring in a copy of my grandfather's filled out.
Oh, my, that would
It's
be
very
nice.
it's very fascinating.
Oh, my
His
goodness.
filled out.
You have it framed?
In his book, he writes, he shows this, he says, this is who you are on a spiritual way. And he says, I'll give you an example. And he shows this thing with it filled out. And if you know anything about my grandfather, you know that he actually put it in his own diamond. So that's the job this week. And I want to thank, first of all, once again, Rabbi Estes for bringing us in. Torch and myself are very grateful to be here with this wonderful, terrific group of
Can I ask
people.
a question?
Yeah, everyone got some questions. I want to pass this around if we can. Everyone can fill out their details.
Can
We
you
can
tell
ask
me
many
something
questions as
about
well.
Torch? I know a bit about Chabad, but I don't know that much about Torch.
Torch is, let's start with Torch, what Torch is not. It's also important to distinguish. Torch is not a synagogue. We don't operate any rabbinical.
Does that mean my last name or my whole name?
Your whole name and your email, just check off that you came. Torch is not a synagogue. Torch doesn't do marriages. It doesn't do conversions. It doesn't. It's not involved in any life cycle. It's not the typical Jewish organization, which is like a shul of sorts. We don't have any. We don't have any pastoral rabbis. We don't have. We don't organize any prayers. We don't do any of those stuff. We're nonpartisan. We don't have any affiliations. We partner with every different
Isn't
stream.
there a Marlon Minion?
What is-
That's
what
the
is-
independent.
what
Just
is
give a
this
check.
supposed to be?
Just give a check. Today is the May 3rd.
Oh, okay.
Just give a
Well,
check.
is there a torch in any other city?
Torch is the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. We only operate in Houston. We have two classes in Clear Lake, one class in Humble, and some stuff going on in San Antonio. But besides for that, and Sugar Land, right? But besides for that, we're pretty much centered in Houston.
Do y'all have an office?
We have an office, but we have some people who work in the office. But
Where's the office?
the office is on Fondren.
Okay.
And
Near the Chabad or not near?
yeah, not far. But we don't have. It's just a administrative office. It's not. Nothing happens
So
there.
what is your focus then? What is,
So Shalhevet is our big. That's the big part of the organization. That's what we have. We partner with 11, now 12 congregations in Houston, providing adult education. Like for example, like this class is a partnership of Congregation RME and Torch, where we come to RME and people here are members of the congregation, and we come and we partner with them in providing education. Right, we're in 12 different communities, congregations every single week.
yes, but when Torch started out here in Houston, what did they do? Do you know?
So they started off. It was 1998. It was a long time ago, but well, they did some. We're at a crossroads now, an educational crossroads.
What are those things that
We did a lot of different things back in the past that we don't do anymore. Like for example, we don't have any presence on campus.
lights or they?
We don't do
That's really what this is, yeah.
any campus outreach. We don't do any of that.
Is that too high? Is that too high?
But that's our big thing. We teach in high schools. We have 250 students every single week in different programs, different high schools. Yeah. We have the Jewish Ethics Institute, Rabbi
That I
Grossman.
knew.
Right, that's big.
I used to work for Congregation Beth Rumba. I was in their
From the
office.
department. Oh, really lovely.
Well, so at that time, when I was there, Torch used to come in and study. And I'd be in my little office, and they'd be yelling and screaming, and I'd run out. What's going on here? Don't worry, Ronnie, don't worry, you know. We're just studying, you know. And then I understood, of course, I knew, but they were so loud, you know. But that's when I met the rabbis.
It was nice.
Was it fun?
Go to the restroom before I go. I got a long drive, 45-minute drive.
Really, you came? I'm so honored.
Didn't know that.
You came just to hear me?
So I
Yes, sir.
I'm so honored.
Okay.
I have to do this anyways. Every Shabbat I come,
Okay,
you know,
makes
to the
sense.
service.
Where do you live?
Richmond, Texas.
Oh,
Good drive.
well, it's a schlep, yeah.
But it goes by fast because it's all worth it. It's all worth
Well,
it.
this was very interesting. I must say, this is an area that I have not studied.
He hasn't done it yet.
So it's really how to improve yourself.
Yes.
That's the key.
Thank you.
Yes, that's what it's all about. It's all about self-improvement. Becoming better people. You enjoy it?
Not bad.
Not bad? No, thank you. I'll tell my wife.
Not bad.
I rarely offer high praise on anything.
That's good.
I get used to it. So I have to be a bit more exposed. Yes, I've seen some of that before. I think one of the things that I'll have to watch and see is working with a young rabbi who doesn't have the life experience of the people here.
Yeah, I'm a young whippersnapper.
Right? So sometimes...
One of the few times I'm not the youngest person in the room.
Yes.
Does that make you feel better, Rabbi? Does that make you feel better? He feels older now. He's older.
Enthusiasm and
I'm 6 years
largely theoretical knowledge has to be tempered.
You know what? I'm here to learn as well. I'm here to learn.
You're learning
That's,
from us.
that's the point. This
He
life
wants to
experience.
get, he wants to get his metaphor. He wants to get his flying below the radar.
Exactly. Flash to the radar. Find my own niche.
So in other
Or
words,
niche.
it doesn't matter how old we are, we're always learning.
Sure. It's always be learning. Always be growing.
As long as the candle is burning, there's time to repair.
Exactly.
Well, it's really good. I'd like you to suggest a book that I could get.
Well,
I
have
can
you heard of the
understand.
Mussar Institute?
Mussar Institute. No, I have. Mussar is.
Google the Mussar Institute, Alan Marinis. He obviously as the name.
We use the Marinus book.
You do use it?
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I have both of it. I have Jacob's Ladder, which I have written all over, and then the second one that's got
Holiness, yeah.
Everyday Holiness, yeah.
Everyday Holiness. There you go. Two books by Rabbi. He's not Rabbi. I think it's just
No,
Al
it's
Marinus.
Al Marinus, yeah.
He does a fantastic job talking about Mussar, describing what it is.
And where do you
Two
get those books?
Jacob's Ladder. I don't know. I'm sure you can find it on
Jacob's
Amazon.
Ladder and
Climbing Jacob's Ladder.
Everyday
Barnes and
Holiness.
Noble.
Alan Marinus. How do you spell his name?
Morinis.
N-I-S, I think. He's Canadian.
For sure. Give it out. I'll be happy to. I'm funny this.
See, I'm taking it. I'm not guaranteeing you I'm going to do it, but I'm taking it.
First step. So yeah, that's for sure the
You got to
first step.
start at the beginning.
No guarantee.
One story starts with single step.
Exactly. Exactly.
All the irony of
Thank you for
using
coming.
nouns.
We decided
speaks
that
religion.
worry is not only a negative